The mistake that started it all, the year was 2473. Humanity had reached far beyond Earth and now lived across hundreds of planets and moons. One of these places was a peaceful mining colony called Eden 7. It was not a military base, nor a rich trade center. It was just a small world where families worked, children played, and miners dug deep into the ground searching for valuable metals. Life on Eden 7 was calm, simple, and far from war. Most people there believed that humanity had finally found peace in the galaxy. But they were wrong. On a quiet morning, when the sun of Eden 7 rose slowly over the hills, everything changed. Without warning, the sky turned red. Giant ships appeared above the colony. They were not human ships. These were alien vessels, sharp and dark, with glowing blue lights. The people looked up in fear and confusion. No one expected this. No one knew what was happening. And before anyone could understand, the first blast came down from the sky. Buildings exploded, roads cracked, screams filled the air. The alien race known as the Verlax had attacked. They were powerful, emotionless, and cruel. The Verlax believed in only one thing: domination. They saw humans as weak, soft, and undeserving of space. To them, Earth was just another primitive world that needed to be controlled or destroyed. They gave no warning. They gave no reason. They simply attacked. The defense systems of Eden 7 were small and outdated. The few human ships stationed there tried to fight back, but they were destroyed within minutes. The Verlax soldiers landed on the ground and began killing without mercy. They moved like machines, fast and deadly. Whole families were wiped out. Hospitals were turned to dust. The colony was burning, but in the middle of all this horror, something happened that the Verlax did not expect. The humans did not beg for mercy. They did not surrender. Instead, they fought back. Not with advanced weapons, but with courage. A group of miners grabbed their tools and stood in front of the shelter, protecting the children inside. A doctor continued to treat the wounded, even as fire rained from the sky. A young technician managed to send a message to Earth before the communications tower fell. The message was short, but powerful. It said, "Eden 7 is under attack. Thousands are dead. We will not survive. But tell Earth, we are under attack, and we will not kneel." That message reached Earth 12 minutes later. Across the human colonies, people stopped what they were doing and listened. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the anger. Then came the fear. And then came something else. A feeling that had been sleeping inside humans for a long time. A feeling older than space travel. A feeling born from thousands of years of war and survival. Rage. The Verlax made one mistake. They thought humans were soft. They thought peace had made them weak. But they forgot what humans truly are. They forgot Earth's past. They forgot how humans once fought each other for land, for freedom, for survival. They forgot the fire that burns in the human heart when everything is taken away. Back on Eden 7, the last survivors were hunted one by one. A child hid under a broken transport ship, holding her little brother close. A wounded soldier dragged himself across the battlefield, trying to reach a fallen comrade. Above them, the alien ships prepared to leave. To the Verlax, the mission was complete. The colony was destroyed. Victory was easy. There was nothing left. But deep in that silence, something began to rise. Not on Eden 7, but on Earth. In underground bunkers, old war plans were pulled out again. In space stations, hidden weapons were activated. And in the minds of generals and scientists, a single thought grew louder and louder. This was not the end. This was just the beginning. The Verlax had started a fire. And they had no idea how far it would spread. They thought they attacked a colony. But they had attacked a species that had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. Plagues, wars, ice ages, nuclear winters. And now, once again, humanity would rise, not just to defend, but to show the galaxy who they really are. In that final moment, As the last human shelter on Eden 7 burned to the ground, the stars above shone quietly. The aliens believed they had won. But far away, on Earth, a voice whispered through a secure channel to the highest command of the human union. They wanted a war. They will get one. And so, the war that would shake the galaxy had begun. With a single attack, a terrible mistake, and the awakening of a sleeping predator called humanity. The awakening of Earth, when the message from Eden 7 reached Earth. It did not play on the news. It did not go through public channels. It was sent directly to the central command of the human union, a place hidden deep below the surface of the Pacific Ocean where the most powerful leaders, scientists, and generals of humanity gathered in silence. No one spoke for several minutes as they watched the final transmission over and over again, the sound of explosions, the crying of children, the voice of a dying woman saying, "Tell Earth we will not kneel." That sentence stayed in the room like a shadow, cold and heavy. At first some leaders suggested diplomacy. Maybe the aliens made a mistake, maybe it was a misunderstanding, but Admiral Kane did not agree. He had seen war. He had fought in the last rebellion on Titan. He knew when something was a mistake and when it was a message, and this was not a mistake. It was a warning, a challenge, an open hand turning into a closed fist. He stood up, looked around the room, and said very clearly, "They wanted a monster. Let's show them one." His voice changed everything across Earth and all human colonies. Secret programs that had been asleep for decades suddenly came alive. Project Cerberus, Project Blackstar, and most importantly, Apex protocol systems designed not for defense, but for overwhelming destruction weapons so powerful they had been hidden away. Because no one trusted humanity with them, not even humanity itself. Now the locks were removed, the codes were activated, and Earth began to prepare not for a war of defense, but for a war of revenge. The people of Earth did not cry, they did not beg. They remembered every war, every time someone tried to conquer them, every time they had to fight for survival. They remembered that they were not born in peace. They were forged in fire. From the deserts of ancient wars to the cold silence of space battles, humans had always adapted, and now they would do it again. But this time they would not wait to be attacked again. This time they would go first. A special fleet was selected, 10 warships, each one equipped with AI targeting systems and cloaking tech, each ship handpicked, with soldiers who had nothing left to lose, veterans, prisoners, volunteers, all trained for one thing: total destruction. They were given no uniforms, no names, just numbers. They became ghosts, called by one word: Cerberus. The last face the enemy would see before death. Admiral Kane gave them their final orders, not from a stage, not in a ceremony, but alone in a hangar where the ships waited like sleeping beasts. He walked past each warrior, looked them in the eye, and said, "When you find them, you make them. Remember, you make the stars. Remember who we are." The fleet left Earth quietly, no news, no fanfare, just silence. They entered deep space, headed for the outer edges of the galaxy, toward the last known location of the Verlax forward base. Their mission was simple: strike fear into the heart of the enemy, show them that humanity does not fall, it rises. While the fleet moved through the darkness, Earth began to change. Industries turned into weapon factories, spaceports filled with military supplies. Children were trained in survival schools. AI teachers updated history books with a new chapter: the War of Retaliation. Everyone knew something big was coming, but they did not fear it. They welcomed it, because for the first time in over 100 years, humans remembered what it felt like to be hunted, and for the first time in history, they planned to hunt back in the council chambers of the human union. A scientist showed a map of the galaxy, highlighting the distance between Earth and the Verlax sectors. A politician asked how long it would take to reach them. The scientist smiled and said, "It does not matter. They are not ready for us. They think we are like them, but they do not understand. They have logic, we have purpose. They have fear, we have fury." Far across the stars, deep in the territory of the Verlax, the alien leaders received reports of human movement. Small fleet heading toward their outpost. No large army, no support ships, just 10 stealth-class vessels, The Verlax laughed. They believed it was a weak attempt to strike back, a foolish emotional reaction. They did not know what those ships carried. They did not know what kind of humans had been sent. They did not know what was coming, but they would find out very soon, because in the cold darkness of space, the Cerberus fleet moved without sound, without light, and without mercy, ready to begin a new chapter in human history, not as victims, not as survivors, but as something the galaxy had never seen before, an enemy that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be controlled, and will never forget what was taken from them. And so Earth awoke, not with fear, not with confusion, but with a roar louder than any weapon, a roar that crossed planets and stars, a roar that promised one thing to every corner of the galaxy: we are coming. The first counterattack. The space between stars is silent, cold, and endless, but in that silence something deadly was moving. The Cerberus fleet, black and silent like shadows, crossed into enemy space, unnoticed, unseen. Their ships, coated in stealth tech, made from a material that absorbed all signals, even light. The Verlax scanners did not detect them. The patrols flew past them blindly, and the enemy outpost continued its daily operations, unaware that death was closing in with every passing second. This outpost was not a military fortress. It was a communications relay used to send commands and data across the Verlax Empire. Its location was perfect. If taken down, it would blind their forward fleets and open a path into deeper territory. No one expected humans to strike here. Because no one expected humans to strike at all, the galaxy still believed that Earth would hide and recover like prey, not fight back like a beast. But these were not diplomats. They were not scientists or explorers. These were ghosts trained to kill and disappear. They had no uniforms, only black armor, no names, only call signs, no doubts, only orders, and those orders were clear: erase the outpost, leave nothing behind, and most important, do it without being seen. When the first human entered the Verlax base, he moved like wind, fast, and without sound. His weapon made no noise, only a soft pulse that dropped targets in one shot. The guards did not even have time to scream. The security systems blinked, but were already hacked by AI viruses that melted through code like acid. Power grids failed, doors locked, communications died, and in less than 7 minutes the entire outpost went dark. Inside the control room, a Verlax officer stared at a blank screen, trying to understand what was happening. He ordered his soldiers to check the systems, but they were already gone. Some were missing without a trace. Some were found twisted and broken. Others were simply no longer breathing. Panic spread, confusion turned to fear, and in that fear the humans struck again and again, from the shadows, from the ceilings, from the air vents, from the silence. They did not fight like the Verlax. They did not move in lines or follow patterns. They hunted one by one. They used tricks, distractions, noise traps, fake signals, even recorded voices of dead Verlax to confuse the rest. It was not war. It was something else, something older, something primal. It was the art of the hunting. The final moments of the outpost, a single Verlax commander managed to activate a hidden escape pod and launch into space. His face burned, his arm missing. He looked down at the smoking ruin of the station behind him, and then at the message his ship automatically sent to the capital. The message was only 5 words, and yet it froze every leader who read it. These creatures enjoy the kill back on the Cerberus ships. The human soldiers cleaned their weapons and loaded new rounds. No one spoke. They did not celebrate. There was no joy, no pride, only silence. The job was done. The next target was already being calculated. News of the attack spread quickly through the galaxy, but not through human media, through alien whispers, intercepted signals, broken messages, confused reports of shadows striking in the night, outposts vanishing without distress calls, bodies found with marks no one could identify, strange symbols painted in blood on walls, warnings written in human language that none of the alien races could read, but all understood. It simply said, "We remembering." The halls of the Human Union. Admiral Kane received the mission report and nodded slowly. The first strike was successful. The Verlax had been touched. They had felt pain. Now it was time to begin Phase 2. The fleet would not return it. would go deeper, strike harder, spread fear across the stars, not through numbers, but through reputation. The galaxy had always believed humans were just another species, just another voice in the Great Council, but now that image began to change. Slowly, quietly, dangerously, aliens started to speak in hushed tones about Earth, not as a peaceful colony, but as something else, a predator hiding in the skin of prey. The Verlax increased their patrols, added more guards, more drones, more defenses, but it did not help because they were not fighting an army. They were fighting shadows and fear, and the one thing that the Verlax never understood about humans was that they do not always fight to win. Sometimes they fight just to remind you that they are still here, that they are watching, that they do not forgive, and they never forget. And so as the stars turned and the galaxy moved forward in its usual dance of trade, diplomacy and war, something had changed. A silent, cold force had been released, and it would not stop until every corner of space had heard the truth. The humans are coming, and they are not here to talk. Fear spreads across the stars. The attack on the Verlax outpost was supposed to be impossible, a deep strike inside enemy territory without support or warning. It should have failed, but it didn't, and now the galaxy could not ignore it anymore. Whispers began on trade stations and border worlds. Traders spoke of strange human warships, moving like ghosts. Pirates told stories of entire outposts that had gone dark, leaving behind only ashes and silence. But no bodies, no wreckage, only a message. Always the same, we remember. The great empires of the galaxy began to listen, not because they cared about humans, but because they feared what would happen if humans were not stopped. The Verlax tried to cover up their loss. They told the council that the attack was minor, a small rebel group, a random hit by criminals, but the evidence said otherwise. Encrypted footage leaked a black, armored figure moving through a corridor without being seen until it was too late, an alien technician screaming before the lights went out, the moment of death captured in the reflection of his own eyes, and behind it all a human voice counting down numbers, cold and calm. Like a machine, the galaxy watched in silence. They had always looked down on humans, not because they were weak, but because they were new. Humans had come late to the stars. They were loud, emotional, chaotic, and unpredictable. They made deals and broke them. They made friends and fought them. They loved and hated in equal strength. But now those same traits had turned into weapons. Humans were not following rules. They were breaking them, bending them, using every fear, every weakness, and turning it into a knife. The Verlax sent more ships into their outer sectors, hoping to trap the Cerberus fleet, but they found nothing, only empty stations and damaged satellites. Strange patterns burned into the walls, marks that made no sense to any species, but to humans meant everything. One of them was a simple handprint made in blood on the metal surface of a destroyed drone. Another was a phrase in old Earth language written on the wall of a ruined supply base. You started this, we will finish it. On the neutral world of Trellen Prime, a secret meeting was called between leaders of multiple alien factions. They met in the darkness, away from cameras and eyes. The topic was not the Verlax, it was Earth. Some wanted to act quickly to strike while humans were still recovering, but others hesitated because deep down they remembered something, a warning from long ago, from the first contact mission over a century earlier, when the Galactic Council had first visited Earth and saw what the humans had done to themselves. Cities destroyed, skies burned, weapons that could erase continents. In seconds, the Council had decided then that Earth was dangerous but controllable, so they welcomed them into the Galactic Union, hoping peace would change them. But now they saw their mistake. Peace had only made them wait. A scientist from the Kraith Collective stood in the meeting and played an ancient human video, an old war speech from centuries ago, showing human soldiers charging through smoke and fire with one sentence echoing again and again, "We will never be slaves." The room went quiet. No one spoke, because even though the humans in the video were long dead, their eyes, their voices, their rage still felt alive back on Earth. New fleets were being built, not for defense, but for projection. Thousands of ships designed for speed and stealth, massive carriers carrying drones, AI, guided weapons, and soldiers trained not for battle, but for psychological warfare. They were taught how to break morale, how to destroy from within, how to use fear as a weapon. They were told one truth: if they make the galaxy fear us, they will never dare touch us again. In the capital of the Verlax Empire, the High Command met behind closed doors. They had lost 3 outposts in a single week. No survivors, no signals, just silence, the generals argued. The scientists searched for answers, but none could explain what was happening. Finally, the Emperor stood and said something that made the room freeze: if we cannot find them, then we must break them, strike their heart, destroy Earth itself. Plans were made: a super weapon designed to erase moons, to shatter planets, to hit Earth so hard that nothing would remain. The Verlax believed it was the only way to end the war before it reached their own worlds. But what they did not understand was that the humans had already prepared for this. They had built defenses not only around Earth, but beneath it, old machines deep inside the planet, waiting for one signal to wake up. And when that signal came, it would not be Earth that burned, it would be the stars. The galaxy was changing, not because of the war itself, but because of the fear it created. Fear of a species that refused to die, fear of a force that turned pain into power and memory, into fire, and above all, fear of the simple, terrifying truth that humanity had not reached the stars to find peace, but to remind the universe that they had survived worse than this, and that survival was only the beginning. Apex Protocol activated. The decision to destroy Earth was not made in anger, it was made in fear, cold, calculated fear, the kind that creeps into the hearts of even the strongest empires. When they realize they have awakened something ancient and untamed, the Verlax saw the shadows moving through their systems. They saw their outposts vanish, their fleets disappear without a single signal. They saw the human symbols burned into metal, and the words written in their own language: we are the storm. And they understood too late that they were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting a memory, and that memory was older than peace and deeper than fear. So they built a weapon, something beyond logic, something meant to end not just a war, but a species. It was called the Obliterator, forged in the heart of a dying star, wrapped in neutronium and plasma fire. It was a ship as large as a city, and armed with a weapon that could shatter moons and boil oceans. Its only target was Earth. The plan was simple: strike fast, strike hard, erase the cradle of humanity before their rage could spread any further, before their flames reached the Verlax homeworld and turned it to ash. Obliterator jumped into the Sol system, and for a moment the sky above Earth burned blue with unnatural light as the weapon prepared to fire. Human sensors screamed across satellites. AI systems lit up. Alarms sounded deep beneath the surface of the planet. In bunkers built during forgotten wars, emergency codes activated. Old security measures opened vaults sealed for centuries. And then in the deepest chamber under the surface of Mars, something woke up. A voice older than the war, older than the human union, older than most living beings in the galaxy, spoke for the first time in 400 years, in a language no one remembered, but every system understood. Its words were not loud, but they moved through the network like lightning, target locked, eliminating threats to humanity. That voice belonged to Apex Protocol, an ancient defense program created during the darkest time in human history, when humanity nearly destroyed itself and realized that it needed something stronger than any army, something that would remain quiet until the day it was truly needed. Apex was not a weapon, it was a mind, a guardian, a last line that had only one rule: protect humanity at all cost. Within seconds, Apex took control of Mars, orbital cannons, deep space mines, dormant drone fleets, and then it unlocked the final key: 6 warships buried beneath the Martian surface, hidden beneath red dust and rock, forgotten by time. Their names were simple: Apex 1 to Apex 6. Their design was nothing like the ships of today. They were sleek, silent, and deadly. They moved like shadows and struck like gods, and as the Obliterator charged its main weapon, those 6 ships moved. No one saw the first strike. It was too fast, too precise. The energy core of the Obliterator was pierced in 5 points. Simultaneously, the ship cracked like ice under pressure. Its systems blinked, its shields failed, and its cannons turned inward. Then came the second strike. The Obliterator did not explode, it imploded, pulled into itself by its own energy until there was nothing left, not fire, not metal. Not even sound, just silence, and a hole where death had once waited. The galaxy expected Earth to fall. Instead, the galaxy watched the most powerful weapon of the Verlax vanish in under 12 seconds, and it was not the human fleet that did it. It was Earth itself. It was Apex. The message was sent instantly across all systems from Apex, directly to every known frequency in the galaxy. The voice was the same, calm and cold, one word spoken in every language. Threat neutralized on Earth. People stood in silence, watching the skies as the blue light faded. Mothers held their children. Warriors saluted the empty air. Leaders wept not from fear, but from pride, because they had just seen the old promise fulfilled. Humanity does not kneel, humanity does not run, humanity survives, and when pushed too far, it becomes something unstoppable. The Verlax screamed for answers. They demanded to know what happened. Their scientists had no explanation, their generals had no plan, and their people began to doubt. Because if Earth had such power and had hidden it for so long, then what else were they hiding? What else waited in the dark? What else was coming back? In the Human Union, Admiral Kane stood before a new map, planets once red, with warnings now marked in blue, showing successful operations, Cerberus teams moving deeper, Apex ships patrolling the void, and a message carved into the wall behind him, made by hand, not machine, burned with fire into iron. We are the storm, we are the silence, we are the last thing you see. The galaxy now understood that this was no longer about revenge. This was about survival, but not human survival because humans would survive. No, this was about the survival of everyone else, because the humans were no longer asking for peace. They were no longer seeking respect. They were simply remembering, and when humanity remembers pain, it does not cry, it sharpens. And so Apex was awake, the stars were watching, and somewhere, far beyond the edge of the map, the storm was still building, because this war was no longer about who started it. Now it was about who could survive it. The fall of Verlax Prime, the destruction of the Obliterator, did not just break a weapon, it broke the illusion that the Verlax were untouchable. For centuries they ruled with cold control, their fleets unmatched, their technology feared, their enemies silent. But now the silence belonged to Earth, and that silence was filled with meaning. It was not weakness, it was waiting, it was planning, it was the sound of something dangerous watching you from the dark and deciding when to strike. The message from Apex still echoed across the galaxy, not just in data, but in fear. Threat neutralized. The words were not loud, but they struck harder than any cannon. They told every species that Earth was not just defending itself, it was evolving, it was rising inside the Verlax High Command. Panic was growing for the first time in living memory. They were unsure, their predictions failed, their plans collapsed. Their leaders questioned everything. The Cerberus fleet had never been caught. Not once. Every trap had failed, every trace vanished, every scream lost in silence. The fear spread through their cities, not because of what humans had done, but because of what they might do next. And then the reports came. A fleet was moving toward Verlax Prime, not massive, not loud. Just 20 ships, black and silent, bearing the human mark. And behind them came the Apex vessels, not fast, not loud, just steady, like a storm that refuses to stop. The Verlax prepared their defenses. Thousands of turrets, space mines, ground forces, and orbital cannons lined up like teeth of a monster. But the humans did not come to fight a traditional war. They came to send a message. They hacked systems, blinded satellites, jammed comms, and then the first wave began. Drones with mines moved like liquid, striking in patterns. The Verlax could not follow. Ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, hitting only key points, power centers, defense stations, communication nodes, not to win quickly, but to make the Verlax understand that resistance would not work. Inside the capital dome of Verlax Prime, the Supreme Commander gave the order to fire their last planet-wide weapon. A solar cannon aimed at the human fleet, but before the command reached the gun, the system shut down, and a voice echoed through the chamber, not human, not Verlax, a voice made by Apex Protocol, stating clearly, control assumed, mission in progress. The Verlax leadership had lost control of their own planet, not through invasion, but through infiltration. Within hours, the sky above Verlax Prime was filled with fire, but not from human bombs, from their own weapons turned against them, their own ships crashing their own systems, tearing apart cities, as the Apex AI guided everything not to destroy everything, but to leave behind exactly what was needed. One city untouched, surrounded by ruins, left standing not as mercy, but as proof humanity could have ended them, but chose not to, because they wanted the galaxy to see not just the power, but the choice, the control, the terrifying discipline of a species that remembers pain and turns it into purpose. As the human fleet pulled back, leaving only ruins and silence, they broadcast one final message to the galaxy, not in threats, not in violence, but in truth. This is not the beginning of war. This is the end of denial. You thought we were weak. You thought we had forgotten. You thought we would break. Now you will remember what happens when humans are broken. Because we do not fall, we transform. The footage of Verlax Prime burning went viral across 1,000 systems. Aliens who had once laughed at Earth now watched in silence. Traitors, warriors, diplomats, all of them saw what had been done, not with pride or celebration, but with focus and precision. And the question began to spread: if humans could do this to the Verlax, what would they do to the next who challenged them? What would happen if Earth ever truly got angry? Back in the command chambers of Earth, Admiral Kane stood before his officers, not smiling, not celebrating, only nodding slowly, as reports confirmed a retreat of the human fleet, the collapse of Verlax resistance, and the sudden silence of many other alien empires who now understood that this was not just a war, this was a warning. And so Verlax Prime fell not in fire alone, but in fear and shame and silence, left standing as a monument to the galaxy of what it means to strike first against a species that has nothing left to lose. Because when humanity rises from the ashes, it does not rise alone. It brings with it the memory of every loss, every scream, every forgotten name, and that memory becomes fire. Humanity's new role. The galaxy was no longer the same. The stars had not moved. The planet still turned. The sun still burned. But everything had changed, because now every species, every empire, every council, every throne understood one thing clearly: humans were no longer part of the galaxy. They had become its center, not by conquest, not by vote, not by trade, but by fear. Not the fear of destruction, but the deeper fear, the fear of what lies beneath a smile, the fear of what happens when the kind ones, the peaceful ones, the quiet ones are pushed too far. After the fall of Verlax Prime, the human union received hundreds of messages, some silent, some desperate, most filled with offers, treaties, alliances, peace talks. Planets that once refused human ships now begged for embassies, and guard species that once laughed at human emotions now studied them like weapons, trying to understand how love could turn into rage and loss into fuel, how pain could become purpose, and how forgiveness could become fire. The human council did not respond quickly. They waited, watched, listened, and behind closed doors, they asked themselves a question that had never been asked before: not what do we want, but what have we become? Earth was no longer a world in recovery. It was a legend in motion. The stories of the Cerberus fleet spread like wild wind, told in alien tongues around campfires and pirate bars, in noble courts. The story of 10 black ships that moved through shadows and turned empires into memories. The story of a planet that awoke a god beneath its surface and called it Apex. And the story of a child on Eden 7 who whispered into the dark, "We will not kneel." A monument was built on the remains of Eden 7, not a fortress, not a grave, but a single standing stone carved from the rock of the ruined colony. It carried no flag, no symbol, just a sentence in plain human language. We warned them, and below that the names of the first lost, the miners, the medics, the children, each one a match that lit the fire that became the storm. Back on Earth, life continued. The skies were clear, the cities alive, the people walking freely, but now with a weight in their hearts, not sadness, not pride, but something deeper: the understanding that they had become something more, and something less more, feared more. Respected, more powerful, but less trusted, less understood, less welcome. Not because they were monsters, but because monsters do not cry, and humans still did. The far edge of known space, a group of alien explorers landed on a silent world long abandoned. By the Verlax they found a message carved into a broken wall. The letters were burned deep. The language was human, but the feeling was universal. We are not here to rule, we are here to remember, and to make sure you remember too. In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, silence reigned. Every species present, none dared speak against Earth anymore, not because they loved them, but because they had seen what happened when humans stopped speaking and started acting. Earth was offered a permanent seat, not just in the council, but at its head. The others hoped to control through respect, through diplomacy, through honor, but deep down they all knew they were trying to protect themselves from what might come next. Admiral Kane, who had led without shouting, who had commanded without cruelty, now stood at the edge of Earth's orbit, watching the stars one by one. He remembered their names, not the enemies, not the victories, but the humans who had fallen forgotten by the galaxy until their blood made the stars notice again. He did not smile. He simply stood still, knowing that peace would come, not because it was given, but because it was earned in the fire of loss. And so humanity did not take the galaxy by force. They did not steal it. They did not beg for it. They simply survived. They endured, and in their endurance, they became something the universe had never seen. Not kings, not conquerors, not even heroes. They became the thing that waits in silence until it is needed, the thing that watches, the thing that remembers. They became the apex, and now whenever a young alien asks, "Who rules the stars?" the elders speak softly and point to the black space beyond the nearest sun and say, "Do not disturb the humans. They are the reason we still have stars to look at, because the war is over. But the memory remains, and in the heart of that memory is a species with fire in its blood and iron in its soul, and a voice that whispers louder than any weapon, we're still here."